Let's talk about self-compassion. One of my favorite meditation teachers, Jack Kornfield, says, if your compassion does not include yourself, it's incomplete. So, self-compassion is compassion that includes ourselves. By definition, you could say it's taking the same sense of care and kindness that we would show someone we really love, and we would direct that towards ourselves. Self-compassion also requires the recognition of suffering. Like when we express compassion for someone that we love, there's a recognition that that person is suffering to whatever degree. And self-compassion requires that same recognition for ourselves, that we might notice and tell the truth about something that's hard for us, a place where we're in pain or possibly suffering. And then we look to extend kindness towards ourselves. Now, let me just say why I think self-compassion, it can be foreign and challenging for many of us, is that we're not really taught to be kind to ourselves. And if you notice, by default, that little voice in our mind is quite often saying pretty ugly or negative things about ourselves. Like if we're not mindfully working to change that, by default, that inner critic is quite critical. And we seem to hold some unconscious belief that we can bully ourselves into change. So that just perpetuates. And we say critical things or hurtful things towards ourselves, thinking that somehow, perhaps unconsciously, that that's actually going to make a difference and have us be better or do different. And in my experience, it doesn't really work like that. That hurtful and harmful self-talk only perpetuates a sense of guilt and shame and really keeps us trapped in this spiral, right? In these patterns that just play out over and over again. I truly believe that it's much more effective to love ourselves into change. And that when we make the effort to be kind and compassionate towards ourselves, that we're really making an honest effort towards evolution, self-realization, and greater awareness that will impact every area of our life. So in this next series, we're going to talk about what is self-compassion. And we're going to look a little bit about sorry, it's a mouthful. We're going to look at the 3 elements of self-compassion. We'll talk a bit about what self-compassion is not, and then we'll talk about some ways that you can begin to practice it in your own life. So to begin, I would invite you to just be aware of that little voice in your head and notice how often or to what degree you're compassionate to yourself or perhaps critical and judgmental of yourself, and just kind of take note of what the current state is. And then we'll come back to the conversation and begin putting some practices in place.